everyone, this is part one of bones and skeletal system. So we're going to understand what bones are made of and then how they heal. That's what bone remodeling is. And then bone diseases like osteoporosis. Okay, so you can watch that video. Okay, so initially during fetal development, the baby starts out as cartilage, and then that cartilage is replaced with bone. And so bone and cartilage are going to see are really tied together. When we have an injury and break a bone, first cartilage is going to form, and it's kind of like temporary, and then the bone is going to form like kind of integrated within that. Okay, so skeletal cartilage is a type of cartilage. It's really resilient. It's mostly made of water. There aren't blood vessels or nerves. You have perichondrium, which is a layer that goes around the cartilage. It kind of keeps it contained, because it isn't super stable, so it kind of keeps it from expanding too far. And that perichondrium also has the blood vessels. And so cartilage is made of chondrocytes. We've seen that term before. Cyte means cell and chondro means cartilage. And the cells are in little cavities called lacunae, so we'll see that. There's three types of cartilage. There's hyaline, elastic, and fibrocartilage. Hyaline is like your joints, your ribs, your larynx right here, the tip of your nose. Elastic cartilage is what you see in your ear and then your epiglottis, and then fibrocartilage is in your knee and between your vertebrae. Okay, so here's where you find the different types. And so you can see them pointed out there, different parts in your body that have the three types of cartilage, and they're color-coded there for you. Okay, there's two ways that cartilage can grow. Appositional growth is like it's growing from the cartilage that's already there. And then interstitial is you're making like new matrix like inside of the cartilage. So those are your two types of growth. Then once the bones, like once the baby gets older, the fetus gets older, or throughout a child's life, they're going to start calcifying that cartilage. And so different things happen at different times in different bones, but they're going to start replacing or adding cartilage or adding calcium to the cartilage, and that's going to form the bone. Okay, so here are functions of bones that you need to know. So bones are used for support, for protection, for movement, to move your muscles, and then they also store minerals like calcium and phosphorus. So those are the four main functions of your skeletal system. And then, there's three more, sorry. So blood cell formation. So we make our blood cells in our red bone marrow. And you also store fat in your bones. And you make hormones like osteocalcin. And that helps you with insulin, with metabolism, breaking down glucose, things like that. Okay, there are 206 bones in the human skeleton. There are more in children and babies, and then some of them fuse. There are two main groups that they divide the skeleton up into, the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. I think we've had these terms before. So the axial skeleton is skull, vertebral column, and rib cage, and then appendicular is your limbs. And so I think of appendages. That's how I remember that. And then axial is like your axis. Okay, so here is, what is this showing? Axial is the orange part here. It's color coded, and then appendicular is the tan part. Okay, you have a few different types of bones. So you have long bones. That's like usually what we think of as bones, and that would be like your femur or your ulna or your fibula or things like that. They're your limbs, right? And then you have short bones, and they can be cube-shaped, like in your wrist and ankle. They can be sesamoid. That means like a sesame seed, like that you might have on your hamburger bun. And those are a really cool shape that can withstand a lot of force. And so like, you know how it kind of bulges in the middle? That middle part, you can put a lot of force on that and they're not going to break very easily. So an example of that is your patella, but you have some in other places. Then you have flat bones. So that would be like your ribs, your skull. Think of the little bones in your skull, your sternum, your scapulae. And then you have irregular bones, and those are the ones that don't fit into any of the other three categories. So they can be like your hip bones, your vertebrae. They're like weird, complicated shapes. Okay, so here is showing a long bone, like your humerus, A regular bone like your vertebrae, you've got a short bone here in your ankle, your talus, right? And then the flat bone here in your sternum. Okay, so bone structure. The tissue in bones is called osseous, and it's got nervous tissue in it, it's got cartilage, it's got fibrous connective tissue, muscles, cells, epithelial cells, blood vessels. So there's all kinds of different tissues within your organ, your bone organs. They are considered organs, and they are alive. They're made of living cells. Like the bone itself is made of cells. And you can look at it in 3 different levels. You can look at the gross level, which is like the large organ level. Microscopic is going to look at the cells and tissue. And then chemical is going to look at the chemical changes that are happening in your tissues. Okay, so you've got 2 different types of bone according to the gross anatomy. So that's like looking at the large layer. You've got compact bone, and then you've got spongy bone. And think of like a chicken leg. If you're eating a chicken leg and you maybe crack it open, the ends are going to have the compact bone, and then in the inside, that's going to be the spongy bone, and that's where your red or yellow bone marrow are filled. So if you've ever cracked open a hopefully cooked chicken, you'll see cooked marrow in the middle, right? And the little pores. So here's what the compact bone, so spongy bone here, it's showing on the end, and then you have compact bone right here. Okay, and then if you have short, that's for long bones. The compact and spongy bone is for long bones. I don't think I said that. If you have short or irregular or flat bones, they have a different structure because they're mostly compact bone. You're not going to see as much marrow and as much spongy bone. And they have this periosteum, and that's the outside part of the bone. So if you've ever like peeled off, like if you're eating chicken and you've kind of peeled off some of the tissue off the bone, that's the periosteum, and it's kind of a thick like layer. And then the endosteum is on the inside, like the inner wall of the bone. And then you're not going to have as much bone marrow. Like it depends on what bone, but you're not going to have as much bone marrow. And then the movable joint, like if you're looking at a chicken leg and you got the thigh or something, the hyaline cartilage is the part that covers like the end of the bone where you have that joint interfacing. So let's see, here's some flat bone in your skull, right? And you can see a little bit of spongy bone here. And then the trabeculae there. And so it just depends on what type of bone you're looking at. Okay, on a long bone, you have some other structures. The shaft part, like the middle shaft, is the diaphysis. And then the ends of the bone are the epiphysis. And then you have like also different membranes. So you have the definitions there. And then you can have an epiphyseal plate, and that's where they meet, like where those 2 parts meet, and that's called a growth plate. And so sometimes like kids break their bones right there in the growth plate. That's pretty common because it's kind of like a little bit more vulnerable. So you're more likely to break a bone there. Okay, let's see here. So right there's your epiphyseal plate, your growth plate. You can see the proximal and distal. We learned those words, right? Proximal is closer to the point of origin and distal is further. And then you have the diaphysis here in the middle. And then you can see the periosteum, which is that lining on the outside. Okay, so here it's showing articular cartilage, so that would be like where the joint is, and then you've got your compact bone and your spongy bone. Okay, so here's some membranes. There's 2 main types of membranes, which we've seen these words already. So the periosteum is on the outside. You've got a fibrous layer. It's got these Sharpies fibers. They connect to the bone matrix. The osteogenic layer, so osteo means bone and genic means to make. So that's going to be that inner layer that's going to be making new bone cells. And it has stem cells. There's different spots in our bodies that have stem cells that are making new cells, and that's one place. Those would be adult stem cells. And then you got blood vessels that you saw in the pictures that are providing nutrients and removing waste. And then the endosteum is the inner part of the layer. It covers the trabeculae of the spongy bone, like makes little canals. So it's like just lining the inner workings of the bone, right? Also contains stem cells there. So there's also osteogenic cells in there. So you can see the periosteum here, right there, and you can imagine that when you're peeling it off of like a chicken bone. And then you have endosteum in here. Both of them have osteogenic cells. Okay, and then this word is hematopoietic. That means that they're making blood. Like these are the tissues that make blood. Red marrow is in the spongy bone in those little caverns, right? The little trabecular cavities. And you are making, in babies, the babies are making red bone marrow in all of the spongy bones. And then in adults, it's only in certain places, like the long bones specifically. If needed, the yellow marrow can turn into red marrow. Like if you need to make more red blood cells, it can transform into red marrow. Okay, bone markings are all the little nooks and crannies that you have in your bones that tie into muscles, ligaments, or tendons. So you have all these little intentional spots, tunnels, little notches in your bones, and they are the places where all these things tie in. And the bigger the muscle, or the bigger the ligament, or the bigger the tendon, the bigger that marking is going to be. So there's 3 types. You've got a projection, that's a part that sticks out of the bone. And they can vary in size, like between people. So if you have a large muscle, it's going to be bigger. And then depressions are little bowls or cups. So like if you've heard the ball and socket joint, that would be a depression. So joints, vessels, nerves, things like that. And then an opening, it can be a hole or a canal, and that's where like blood vessels and nerves go through. So you have all these little nooks and crannies. Here's a few. So like a tuberosity, a crest, a trochanter, a line, a tubercle, epicondyle, spine, process. You can see some of them like noted here. And they all have different purposes. Like your bones are this shape for a reason. They're not just weird shape to be weird. Each of those little bone markings have a purpose. Oops, I just skipped one, but I think that was another table that showed other bone markings. So review those and know what each one is. Okay, these are the 5 major types of cells that you have in your bones. And some of them are kind of confusing. So you'll want to go through and make sure that you're clear on what each of them is. Osteogenic cells are going to make they're like the stem cells that are going to make new bone cells. And so genic means to make. Osteoblasts are the bone building cells. So I think blast building, I know that seems kind of backwards, but osteoblasts are bone building cells. Osteocytes are just bone cells. The bone lining cells are the membrane, the endosteum that we just looked at. And then osteoclasts are bone destroying cells. So your bones are constantly remodeling and changing. And so when you like break a bone or when you're growing, your bones are changing shape, and so you need cells that are going to break them down and remodel them, and then you have your osteoblasts that are going to build them up. Go. There we go. Okay, so osteogenic cells are also called osteoprogenitor cells. They are stem cells. Remember, they're in the periosteum and the endosteum. And they can make different types. Like, so that's the thing about stem cells. Most of them can make different types of cells. So they can make osteoblasts or bone lining cells, or they can just stay as stem cells. Osteoblasts are bone forming. They take calcium out of your blood, and so they bind up calcium from your blood. And then osteoclasts are going to be the opposite. They're going to release calcium into your blood. Okay, so osteoprogenitor cell, osteoblast, they can become that, or they can just stay as a stem cell. Osteocytes are just bone cells, just regular bone cells. Cyte means cell, osteo means bone. So these are going to stay as bone cells. They can communicate with osteoblasts and osteoclasts to tell them, like, hey, you need to be made, or you need to destroy bone, or you need to make bone. They also, bones respond to force. So what that means, they've done all the research on this. If you use your bones, you're going to make more bone. If you are like inactive, then your bones are going to not be stimulated to make more bone. So somebody who has like osteoporosis or a kid that's growing, they need to be active in stimulating their bones, and that triggers them to know to make more bones. I'm not sure if we'll have a slide with osteoclasts, like we should, but just in case, they are the bone destroying cells, and they're going to release calcium into the blood. So these osteoblasts and osteoclasts are like opposites. Osteoblasts tie up oxygen, osteoclasts release, not oxygen, sorry, calcium. Okay, so bone lining cells are those cells that are your periosteal cells and your endosteal cells we talked about. And then here's osteoclasts. So they break down bone. They do this to remodel. Sometimes this happens when it shouldn't, but most of the time it's good, it's necessary. And they can return calcium to your blood. So if you're low on calcium, your bone could be chewing itself up to release calcium in your blood. Okay, so we got osteoblasts. They will turn into osteocytes. Like once an osteoblast is mature, it'll turn into an osteocyte. And then osteoclasts are going to chew up bone. And I don't think I said this, but these guys have multiple nuclei. You can see them there. Okay, so osteoclast here, multiple nuclei, ruffled border. It's interfacing with the osteoclast and the osteocyte. Okay, so then microscopic anatomy. You got compact bone too. It's also called lamellar bone. You have the osteon, which is like a whole unit. Like in every body system, you're going to have a small microscopic unit that's the guy that does all the work in that tissue. And for bones, that's the osteon. And you have canals and caniculi, and then different types of lamellae. Okay, so an osteon is like one structural unit of a bone. Like we haven't learned about other systems, so I'm trying to think of an example. Like if you've learned about the alveoli in the lungs, those are, or the nephrons in the kidneys, those are one structural unit for that tissue. And it's like one creature, like that's doing the work of the whole tissue. So it is the shape of a cylinder. It's like a little pillar. That's a good way to explain it. And it's made of lamellae. It's made of like a whole bunch of different things that are formed in a circle. And they run like parallel to each other. So you have a whole bunch of them within a bone. And they're really strong. Like the structure makes them really strong. So here's what they look like. This is a single osteon. And look at how the lamellae are going in different directions. So that's going to make it really strong. And then you've got your blood vessels and your nerve right in the middle. And we might see a side picture maybe. So there's canals. That's where the blood vessels are, like that central hole that runs all the way down that pillar. That's where the blood vessels and nerves are. You've also got Volkmann's canals that have endosteum, and they like connect the blood vessels to each other. And you've got lacunae, which are we've already seen this, that's where the osteocytes are. Osteocytes are mature cells, mature bone cells. And then you've got these little caniculi, which are little canals that connect them to each other. So they're all connected. And then osteoblasts are going to be there making new cells, and then eventually they can turn into osteocytes. And I think if you look at a picture and find all these parts, that would be really helpful. Then you've got interstitial lamellae and circumferential lamellae. The lamellae aren't technically part of the osteon, they're like the in-between. But they like help support the osteon, is a good way to think of it. And resist twisting, like they give it strength. Okay, so let's look through this picture. This is one osteon right here, like this circle is one osteon. You've got your circumferential lamellae here. What else do we see? You can see the central canal, right, with the blood vessels, and there's a little osteocyte right there. I'm looking for osteoblasts. There's a perforating canal there that goes like in between, right? So yeah, that shows some of what we looked at, but that's what one complete osteon looks like. and they just are like different layers of cells that are going in different directions, and it makes it really strong. Okay, then spongy bone is not pretty and organized like the compact bone, but it's actually like pretty strong. So the trabeculae are like the mesh kind of, and if you think of it like, yeah, like cables on a suspension bridge, or if you've ever looked at them, when they're building like a steel building, you can see all these like steel cross bridges. It's actually a pretty strong structure. And so this is what it looks like, right? We've seen this picture. So that does have a lot of strength to it. And it also makes it lightweight. Like we need our skull and our bones to be lightweight. That's less work for our muscles. Okay, so bone is made of both organic and inorganic components. So it's got all these cells, all these different types of cells. And then osteoid is like, it's not cells, but it's like some of the stuff that the bones are made out of. But all of that's organic. And then you also have inorganic substances like salts. So 65% of your bone mass is made just from salts. So that's quite a lot. But remember that your bone is made of living cells, right? The fact that it has inorganic compounds makes it really strong. So like calcium, leading component is calcium, and that makes it really strong. Okay, we'll go on to the next.